Hi everyone, I hope this finds you doing well and staying healthy. I want to show an enhancement to IcApexDoc, basically Markdown support for authoring of your ApexDoc content. And I'm also going to show a demonstration of the integration of that feature into Illuminated Cloud. Now, I want to say on the front end that all of these Markdown support features for taking Markdown in your ApexDoc and using that to generate the HTML content for your own use for delivery to customers, things like that, that is all part of IcApexDoc, which is a freely available tool. You do not have to use Illuminated Cloud to take advantage of that, and it can integrate via its command line interface with really any other tool out there that can process in a command line interface, whether that's CI/CD tools, other IDEs, whatever it happens to be. I am going to be showing the integration of the feature into Illuminated Cloud because I think it provides a nice visual understandable representation of these enhancements, and I will try to call out very specifically where something is Illuminated Cloud specific and where it is a general IcApexDoc Markdown support feature. But again, you do not have to have an Illuminated Cloud license in order to take advantage of this feature in IcApexDoc. That is a freely available tool, and this is a feature of that tool. So why did I add support for Markdown to IcApexDoc? Well, I think if you've ever used Markdown to write content, the answer should be pretty obvious. It is a tool, a content creation language that is particularly suited to the creation of content for technical things, software, hardware, specifically software because of things like syntax highlighted fenced code blocks that are aware of the various programming languages that are being used. And I find Markdown to be very efficient, very readable, much more so than HTML or most of the kind of predecessors that would have been used for content creation. And so I've, given that basically ApexDoc is a software documentation tool, having something that is uniquely suited for documenting software seems like a perfect match. So I've wanted this in things like JavaDoc and things like that in the past, and I thought it was time to add it to ApexDoc, and so here it is. All right, so maybe the best way to start this is to just show what it would have looked like before and what it looks like now. So we'll go ahead and take this ApexDoc header comment, and we will compare it before to current. So I'm going to go ahead and compare it to the previous branch, and here we go. Left side is going to be the previous, the right side is going to be current, and you can see exactly what you'd expect. The left side is the same content. I did some typo fixes and made things a little more specific, but in terms of the actual like formatting and such, you can see that it goes from being HTML tags primarily to being Markdown syntax. And it is, in my opinion, much more succinct and much more expressive and much more readable. This is a very small sample, but obviously as this expands across your code base, I think it becomes a much larger win. So things like paragraph breaks just become empty lines. Things like bold just become double stars or double underscores. And we'll look at some of the supported syntax here in just a minute. Things like code blocks go from being unstyled pre-formatted code in HTML to being language-aware, syntax-highlighted fenced code blocks. You can see the use of Apex here. Bulleted lists go from being nested tags to just being stars, pluses, minuses, or if you're using an ordered list, just a number and a dot. And inline code goes to just backticks versus having to use the code tag. So you can see things definitely become more compact, and I think you'll also see more readable. So having said that, let's take a look at what it looks like in the editor. We're going to start touching on some Illuminated Cloud specific features here in terms of the editor integration, but the syntax, the supported syntax, is part of IcApexDoc and is going to be available in terms of taking this Markdown in ApexDoc and turning it into the HTML we'll see in a second. That's independent of Illuminated Cloud. So here in the in the Illuminated Cloud ApexDoc editor, you can see that the markdown things are highlighted to give visual indications of what they mean. Bold is bold. The fence code block is highlighted, and you actually see the syntax highlighting. You can see the bullets are unstyled versus kind of the lighter gray of the actual text. Sorry, that keeps popping up. You can see that things like pre-formatted code are in a fixed width font. They're all in a fixed width font, but are basically called out specifically and don't have the italic style applied to them, things like that. We'll take a look at some other ones, but first let's see how we can get an idea what the generated HTML is going to look like. So I can use QuickDoc. Again, this is a JetBrains IDE feature, QuickDoc, and I can take a look at this in a little pop-up, and you can see the generated HTML. It's worth pointing out right now that the HTML component, the HTML renderer component in the IDE is not a full browser in this case. So it's not going to look exactly like it does in your real browser. You're going to want to do that final check in a real browser to make sure that the styling is exactly like you want. And we'll see a really good example of where things are going to differ in a second, and the browser is going to show you what it's really going to look like. Now, having this pop up is useful, but here's another feature of the JetBrains IDEs is if I press that QuickDoc keyboard shortcut twice in succession, we're actually going to get it docked to the side and we can get a live preview. Now, the keystroke that I used on Windows and Linux is Control Q. So I hit Control Q, Control Q. On Mac, it's going to be F1, F1, F1. And now I can see a live preview. So let's go ahead and use this to explore some of the features of Markdown integration into ApexDoc and the result, the rendered result. So here is an ApexDoc link macro, and it works great. It can navigate to the logger adapter type and all that, but it doesn't have the ability to support an alternative label. So if I wanted to say something like, textual logger space adapter and link to the logger adapter type, I couldn't do that here. But now with Markdown, I can do that. So we'll go ahead and say logger adapter, and I want to link to and you can see, again, this is an Illuminated Cloud feature. Logger adapter, I can see the type it's bringing up for code completion. And I can go ahead and close that. And we can now see that as a link over here. And I'm going to go ahead and say on the front end, there's a bug I've reported to JetBrains that the link may sit there and spin the first time I click on it. I'll just come back and I'll click it again. It's not an IC or IcApexDoc bug. It's something I reported to JetBrains. But it worked that time. Of course, I'm going to tell you about it and it's not going to happen. So I was able to navigate directly to the documentation for the reference class. And now I can navigate back. So I just made a change and you saw that change happen on the fly. Let's look at some other things. So here we have bold text. Let's look at some other ways we can do bold text. So bold, we can see that over there. Italic, and I'm going to show all this in a minute. Strike through, code. If I wanted to do use a heading instead, I could do and we can see that heading over there, and that's a little big, so we'll go ahead and make it a level 3 heading. It's still too big, level 4 heading, and now we can see that that was pretty much what we wanted. And as I showed earlier, or maybe I didn't, if I take off the language here, you can see that the language-specific syntax highlighting goes away in both cases because I haven't mentioned it, so it's being rendered as plain text. If I said something else, it would be a different language. So if I said XML, you'll see it's syntax highlighted differently. We'll go back to Apex and I'll show how I can actually do, say, XML. So I'll say XML, and I'll go ahead and say foo bar equals baz. And you can see that I now have XML specific syntax highlighting. So the nice thing is you're seeing that kind of everywhere. You're seeing it in the editor, you're seeing it in the preview, you'll see, of course, in resulting HTML. Let's take a look at lists. So the editor, again, an IC specific feature, IC being Illuminated Cloud, not IcApexDoc, is I can break lines and it'll do them as continuations. I can join lines. I can create a new line by hitting enter and it'll go ahead and open a new bullet. New bullet. I can add a sublist by hitting enter and then hitting tab, and I can say child 1, child 2. I can add an ordered list by hitting backspace, it erased, and then I can say first, second. And you can see that the formatting over there is becoming increasingly poor. That will look much better in the browser. This is just a kind of a weird behavior of the IDE's native HTML renderer. But it is not breaking those up into multiple lists or anything. Like just adding a little too much space after each nested list level. So we can go down here, enter, takes me to the next bullet. If I hit enter, it knows I'm done with bullets. We'll go down here and do, say, block quotes. This is something from, I'm going to hit enter, continue the block quote. Somewhere else. Hit enter, it'll continue the block quote, hit enter, it'll stop the block quote. I can do an H rule, so I got a horizontal rule. I can do a table, first, second, so I create my columns, and now I'm going to just create my header separator row, and now I'm going to start creating some content. Scott Wells. I can create multi-line content by using HTML inside of Markdown. So we'll say Line 1, I'm going to add a break. Line 2, 1 line. And we can see that that's formatted over there that way. If I wanted to add a middle initial here, I can do that. And you can see it add a middle initial column. Now, I'm missing that. So now let's talk real quickly about formatter support for Markdown in ApexDoc in Illuminated Cloud. So I'm going to open up the settings here, and we can see under Code Style Apex, under the ApexDoc tab, under the Markdown section, I have the ability to turn on or off formatting of Markdown tables and Markdown lists and some features of those. So you can see a preview of this over here. So let's turn off Markdown tables, and we can see that it basically leaves that jagged, or it makes it rectangular. I can turn off padding with 1 space, minimum 1 space within cells. For lists, I can have it format those or not. You can see that now things can be, as long as they reach a minimum level of indentation, continuation lines and things like that are found. But I can have them formatted, and you can see that we have 1, 2, 3 on ordered lists. I can have a monotonic ascending sequence, or I can just have it retain whatever I had there. So there are some options here. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to format, and you can see that my list or my table is now well formatted, well structured, and it saw there were some missing cells, and it filled those in. So now I can say C, and I can say NA, and my table looks bad over here, looks fine over here. And I can go ahead and format. And if I wanted to, by the way, I can even use some formatting in here. I can say make my name bold, and we'll go ahead and make NA code. And you can see all that gets caught up, and I can format again, and everything looks good. So those are some of the editor features showing off some of the Markdown language support capabilities for IcApexDoc. All right, let's go ahead and generate this into the deliverable HTML, the offline HTML. So what I'm going to do, I could do this from within Illuminated Cloud. It has a built-in executor for ApexDoc, IcApexDoc. We'll go ahead and do it from the command line. So we're going to go over here. So I'm going to execute ApexDoc, specifying the project file, sfdx project.json, which we'll use to get things like the source directories, basically the package directories. If there's a namespace, it'll use that. If there's a project name, it'll use that as the title for the generated content, things like that. Output to the ApexDoc directory and use an overview file. Use an overview file of overview.md. Now, this is another change from before. Previously, you could only use overview HTML files. So previously, like this was the overview file, HTML, heading text, a bulleted list. You can see some of the links here. You can see some pre-formatted code. But now you can actually use a Markdown file, again, more succinct. So we have it's a direct translation of what we just saw. Heading to text. We have a bulleted list with those same links, and we have some pre-formatted code, and I have specified that down here as my overview file. So we'll go ahead and execute it, and it's going to find all the source files, it's going to parse all the source files, and it's going to generate all the output files, and it's done. So we'll go ahead and open that up. Opens up in our browser, and we can see that our Markdown overview file was added here. We can see that the links work. So we can click in on the links. Everything there is good. The file that we were editing here with this was logger. So we'll take a look at the documentation for logger. And we can see that things are much more well formatted here, specifically with regard to our lists and things like that. You can see over here the list started getting kind of wonky, but here it looks the way that you would want it to. So the point is this needs to be the final arbiter of whether it's acceptable, the formatting. This is going to give you a great, as you type, real-time preview. It's not necessarily going to tell you what the final content's going to look like all the time. It's pretty good though. So we can see all the things we did. This is a live link. This was that Markdown link, and it actually does link to Logger Adapter. We can see all of our styling. We can see our H2. We can see our two fenced code blocks with language-specific syntax highlighting. We can see our ordered and unordered list kind of nested, multi-line block quote, horizontal rule. We can see our table with some styling applied and some HTML specific multiple lines of cell content. All right, so that's great. Let's take a look now that we know what types of content we can produce, and we've talked about the fact that sometimes you might have to add HTML. So what Markdown syntax is supported? Now, I'm not going to go through every single bullet here. You can read this, but I will say that IcApexDoc uses its own Markdown to HTML generator, converter. I can probably go into reasons for that, but the bottom line is it just made it just fit a little bit better, a little more seamlessly, and allowed me to generate the HTML I wanted to with some of the integration with the rest of ApexDoc. And so it doesn't support maybe every Markdown syntax feature you've ever used. My hope is it supports 95+% of what you need. So all the styling things, there may be multiple variations of certain things like 2 types of bold, 2 types of italic. All the normal Markdown escaping mechanisms are in place. So if you're doing inline code, you can have backticks in your code with /backtick or by using 2 backticks and a space on either side. You can use composition, except places where it doesn't make sense. So you can't do 3 underscores or 3 stars in order to do bold italic. Instead, you just use the alternating versions of those. And code must be the innermost style applied, because if you put anything inside of code, it's going to be escaped. It's going to render as is. We looked at heading text and multi-line block quotes and fence code blocks. One thing I'll call out about fence code blocks, actually 2 things. One is that the language specific syntax highlighting in the browser is provided by highlight.js. You can look up the supported language. You can look up how that works. In the IDE, it's actually using the IDE's knowledge of those languages and its ability to do syntax highlighting. But in the browser, it's going to use highlight.js. And then if you needed to put basically 3 backticks or 3 or more backticks into a fence code block, you just need to have balanced backticks that are more than what you would have in the body as the way you define the fence code block. Images, hyperlinks. Hyperlinks can, of course, be to absolute or relative URLs or references to local declarations in the project. Horizontal rules, tables. We already talked about some of the things with tables, escaping, the ability to use HTML to do more sophisticated cell content, ordered and unordered lists. You get the idea, list nesting. If there's something missing, let me know. Open an enhancement in the IcApexDoc issue tracker. But here's the thing. I am getting almost asymptotically close to open sourcing this thing. After Markdown, there were 2 more things that I want to do. They're both index pages. One of them is an index page by declaration name. So if you know the name of a constant, a class constant, or you know the name of a method in some class or interface or whatever somewhere, you can just go directly to the index page, find that declaration name, and click to go directly to its documentation. So that's one. The other is effectively using the @group and @group content tags that are found in ApexDoc to create a taxonomical tree, effectively, of the tagged content with the group content added similar to the overview content. And of course, that will support Markdown as well. Once those are done, I plan to open source. I'll add the rules for generating pull requests and going through the pull request process. But I look forward to having other contributors. So if there's a Markdown feature syntax that you would like to see that's not there, just let me know. I may add it. If you want to go ahead and take it and create a pull request, send it over to me. Love to see it. If you find any bugs, whether they're in IcApexDoc or they're in Illuminated Cloud's integration of that, open a bug in the respective issue tracker. If you're not sure, open it one or the other, and I'll go ahead and take care of dispositioning it. If you like it, let me know that. I'd love to get feedback on whether you're using it, what you're finding useful, what you're missing. Just let me know. Other than that, thanks for your time. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy.